Northstar, huh? Haven't played her in a while. Welp, it's time to sit in a corner for...
Visual clear. I've got good tone. Bandits rocked. Smoking.
Holy shit!
This is Northstar, Ronin's more passive sister. As a fellow Strider class, Northstar has 3 bars of health and 2 dashes by default. Her primary weapon is the plasma railgun. Equipped with 6 shots, the longer you aim the gun, the more damage the railgun outputs. When fired, the railgun blasts a semi-slow/fast projectile. Northstar's ordnance ability is called Cluster Missile. As the name implies, when activated, Northstar will fire a missile that upon impact with a surface, it'll detonate, and a shower of secondary explosives will pelt the area for a short amount of time. I wonder where I've seen that before. Next, we've got Northstar's defensive ability, the Tether Trap. When deployed, a mine will be sent out. When an enemy Titan or Reaper gets too close, then boom. They're stuck there for a short amount of time unless they decide to shoot it. Then, we've got Northstar's tactical ability, the VTOL Hover. Yeah. And last but not least, we've got Flight Core. It's the VTOL Hover, but now you can shoot, moderately fast missiles. If you hadn't noticed already, Northstar is a sniper. A charge-up high-damage weapon with basically no other offensive abilities? I don't know about you, but if I was a first-time player, that's pretty much telling me I should camp in the corner of the map while I desperately hope and pray some poor schmuck crosses into my line of fire. Well, sorry to break it to you, but that's simply wrong. Now, I'm not saying that you should be charging into the front line with your metaphorical nuts hanging out, but I'm not saying you should sit in the corner all match either. Like Ronin, Northstar has to sort of adhere to that hit-and-run playstyle. The difference is that Northstar has to play a bit more passively due to the nature of her gun, and so cover will be your best friend. As a Northstar out in the open, you're basically saying this: "Hello everyone, I am ill-equipped to resist your aggressive counterfire, but nonetheless, I am here." Northstar's kit is built for burst damage, so you should play accordingly. Find a target, find the closest corner or piece of cover, charge up behind it, peek, and then shoot. This tempo right here is pretty much how you should be playing Northstar like 90% of the time. Keep in mind though, it's never a wise choice to fixate on one opponent. Unlike Ronin, Northstar doesn't really have the most reliable tools to preserve her health pool. That's why it's always important to keep moving or switching up sniping spots, since if you get flanked, all you really have is your tether traps and dashes. As for Northstar's role across the board, she definitely leans towards more of being a support. With her team behind her, Northstar becomes a real force to be reckoned with. But without anybody by her side, she kinda just blows up. In my experience, you'll usually want to wait for another friendly Titan before you drop your Northstar, because without another Titan to grab attention, Northstars tend to get way too easily focused by other Titans or pilots. And speaking of pilots, if you're not hitting those railgun snipes on them, like me, those bastards will eventually suck your health dry. Obviously, she's a lot better against single targets, but don't expect to be the most efficient when it comes to clearing a group of pilots or enemy AI. However, Cluster Missile can mostly get the job done. Its AoE effect is surprisingly big, so more often than not, if you fire it in a high traffic area, you'll get an accidental kill or two. Cluster Missile is also a pretty good deterrent against Titans, as you can block off certain chokes and passageways for a short amount of time. And speaking of deterrents, the Tether Trap is a good one. Whenever it's off cooldown, I'll always deploy it, since there's really no reason not to. When near a Tether Trap, a sound effect will play whenever it's activated, so you'll be able to tell if there's a pesky Titan flanking you. Using it offensively isn't ideal, but in some situations, it can be pretty decent, as you can force the Titan to sit there and eat damage for a bit, whether it is dealt by you, other friendly Titans, or friendly pilots. And VTOL Hover. This ability can be a hit or miss in certain scenarios. On one hand, if you pop the hover at a bad time, it'll leave you high-strung and exposed.
Uh-oh.
On the other hand, you can use it to peek areas on certain maps, access certain routes you couldn't before, and, check this out. Yeah, that's right, you can dodge a flame core. And for Northstar's core, in my humble opinion, it sucks. Granted, a core's a core, but this one will often make you question whether it's worth it or not. In theory, this core does sound really badass, but in practicality, it well, sometimes it feels like it underperforms. As such, I believe Flight Core is best utilized as a last resort option or as a surprise attack. Moving around the map and you unexpectedly run into a Titan? Blow him up. You're sniping somebody and then somebody catches you from behind? Blow him up. And also, back up. So in summary, play cover, avoid pilots unless you're confident you can kill them, spam tether traps and cluster missiles accordingly, and of course, hit those fat and juicy critical snipes on those Titans. So now that you've got a basic gist of what to do as Northstar, let's see which modes are the best. Bounty Hunt sucks! Yeah, I know this may seem a bit unorthodox, but holy crap. While I was gathering footage, Bounty Hunt was just terrible. It's just terrible. As you know, Northstar has a lot of trouble clearing out large groups of enemies. So, when the main objective is to clear out waves of enemy AI, you can start to see the problem. The only thing you can really do in this mode is attempt to whittle down the enemy Titans that fall down, but even then, most people can get their Titans back relatively fast, so just don't play Northstar in Bounty Hunt. In the same boat as Bounty Hunt, I wouldn't recommend playing Amped Hardpoint or Capture the Flag. She can certainly deny enemies from pushing up by locking down sight lines, but if they're already on the objective, then, well, it's gonna take a little bit to flush them out. Attrition can be a mixed bag. In some games, you can completely dominate the other team through your devious snipes, but in others, you feel like, well, to put it simply, you can't do shit. Playing Northstar in attrition really depends on the mindset of the other team and if they decide to hard focus you. So, for my advice, just be careful when you decide to call in your Northstar. But enough of that stuff. The modes where Northstar truly shines are in the Titan v Titan modes. In Titan Brawl, Northstar is easily able to deal out massive amounts of damage over time as she safely sits in the backline while your friendlies clean up whatever's left over. The same can be said in Last Titan Standing, where preserving your Titan is of the utmost importance. Moving on to maps, this time, let's start off with the good ones. Since Northstar utilizes a sniper, she benefits from maps with long sight lines and extensive back areas. One great example of this is Rise. The middle area is pretty much accessible from every angle, and there are plenty of corners and walls to play around. Here's another rule. Dry dock. The left and right lanes of the map are, as you can see, pretty long with little to no cover in the middle, so you're pretty much free to cock-block the entire lane with your railgun. Now for bat maps, well, there are a couple of obvious ones. Complex and Crash Site aren't exactly the biggest maps, and the nature of the geometry encourages CQC combat, which is, not good for you. Unfortunately, I won't dissect each map one by one since that would definitely take way too long, but for me, here's my golden rule. Unless you can't help it, never go down the main choke/area of a map. You don't have any defensive abilities, and so you're liable to many different attacks if you do decide to go that route. Just stick to the sides and you'll definitely last a bit longer. As I already talked about earlier, Northstar has a tendency to get bullied by pilots. The railgun is a sniper type weapon, so unless you're some sort of major league pro gamer and you're hitting all those nasty pilot snipes, chances are you'll eventually get weathered down. I can't overstate this enough, but I'll say it again. Always keep moving. Constantly switching positions makes you less predictable, thus making you less vulnerable to attacks. Also, don't get tunnel vision. And before I dive into the Titans, remember, this upcoming list is based on what I've personally experienced as Northstar. After all, everything is pretty much subjective, and I'm just here to give you a guideline. So, without further ado, let's move on to the first Titan.
Engaging hostile Titan. Calculating consumption for main weapon.
Ion, Ion, Ion. Let me put it in a way you can understand.
He's good. He knows every aspect of this game. But my grandpa put all his gaming knowledge, his whole heart, into assembling this deck. I have to believe that it holds some secret strategy.
Ion is sort of a soft counter to Northstar. In pretty much every situation, the Vortex Shield is going to be enemy number 1. While it may take you a couple of seconds to charge up your gun, all Ion has to do is press one button and poof, your time is wasted.
Peace.
Now thankfully, when the bullet is sent back, it doesn't do too much damage. However, Northstar needs to charge her railgun to do any kind of decent damage, and while you're stuck doing that, Ion has free reign to shoot you and deal damage. Not to mention that she has a little sniper shot of her own, so when you're standing there aiming at her, it'll be pretty easy for her to score a critical hit on you with her laser shot, which is no good. What happens now? Now? We run the fuck away. If possible. Yeah, it's pretty obvious that a good Ion will always somehow manage to put up their shield at the right time, so you know what? It's not even worth your time to face one head on. Instead, you should be looking to find alternate angles so that you shoot at them from the side or back. But if you're stuck having to face one head on, my advice is to not be so predictable with your railgun shots. Sure, charging it up to full power is good and all, but it won't matter if it gets caught. Instead, try charging up your gun midway instead and aim for critical shots. When I first tested this out, I was genuinely surprised by how much damage I was still doing. Of course, your best action in this scenario is to still run away, but if you really have no other options, you'll at least go down with the fight. Tripwire shouldn't really be a problem, since, well, you shouldn't be up close to an Ion anyways, and as for Laser Core, it's pretty easy to avoid since Northstar is a pretty nimble titan and you can just use her dashes to quickly move. Just, don't use VTOL Hover though, since it'll make you an easier target for Laser Core.
Help! Help me!
Engaging hostile Titan, priming offensive thermal systems.
Scorch is going to be one of your easier targets. He's slow, big, and slow.
You'll be needing another use for that, Nick!
Besides Flame Shield and his Thermite Launcher, he doesn't really have any tools to counteract you. Scorch's Thermite Launcher is less reliable at longer ranges and also only has one shot. So theoretically, if you're far away enough, you shouldn't be able to get hit by him. The Thermal Shield is pretty much the only real problem, but again, he's really slow. Your ultimate counter against him is literally just staying far away. But some of you may ask, okay, well, what if he catches you from behind? What then? Well, you can easily outdash him from his effective fire shield range. And if he tries to zone you with the canisters and firewall, well, then you can just hover. And pfft, look at this clip. You can fly right over his flame core. So, in summary, Scorch is your bit.
Engaging hostile Titan. Railgun at maximum power.
Northstar v Northstar is a relatively simple case. In most scenarios, two opposing Northstars will be on the opposite side of the map, and that's pretty much their whole interaction. When they do get down to fighting, it essentially just becomes a game of who's able to peek the corner first and hit their shot. And most times, Northstar v Northstar duels never really end with each other, and it comes down to whoever decided to disengage first because they either did more damage, or they realized that their time is better spent elsewhere. I guess my only real advice is to not peek the same corner twice when you're engaging, because you don't want to line yourself up against easy shots.
Engaging hostile Titan, closing for the kill.
So, we still got problem. Big problem. Alright, who's ready to go find the Ronin?
Sword core activated.
Don't fight Ronin. Unless you spawn him first.
What was that?
As for most Ronins, one good full charge shot on the body is usually a big enough deterrent for a Ronin to go away, since the railgun still does big damage even if they block it. If a Ronin decides to ignore that shot though, well, then I suggest you start running. If a Ronin catches you off guard and gets too close, it's pretty much over. Arcwave hinders your fast movement, Phase Dash bypasses your tether traps, and since Ronin is also a Strider class, he can easily catch up to you regardless. So here's my advice. If you've been listening to me, then you know that you should be placing tether traps whenever you can. Tether traps are important for watching your back, and even if Ronin Phase Dashes through one, if you have another one relatively close by, then they'll get trapped by that one instead, and that'll usually be enough to get away. Cluster missiles are a nice source of damage as well, and hover can be used to avoid Arcwave. However, be aware that hover makes you slower, unless you have a certain kit equipped, which I'll get into later. The best way for Ronin to get off of you is to find another friendly Titan, or you can use your Flight Core. Keep in mind, as you use a Flight Core, you shouldn't be pushing in with it since after it's over, you'll be left stranded. The best way to use Flight Core against Ronin is to just fire away at him as you back up. That way, you can gain some distance as you pump damage into them. Just be mindful that they'll usually sword block. As for Sword Core, you better pray to the melee gods that you can keep punching him before he kills you.
Engaging hostile Titan, 40mm arm to paint and destroy.
Just like with the Northstar matchup, Tone v Northstar usually doesn't really result in anything. Inherently though, Northstar will have the advantage in terms of a long-range battle. Now the number one thing to look out for is Tone's particle wall. However, it's actually pretty easy to counter it. For one, about 2 charged shots with a railgun is enough to take it down completely. In my opinion though, it's better to shoot a cluster missile at the wall and then reposition for a better shot. The reason why you want to use a cluster missile against the wall is that the secondary explosions from the initial impact actually bleed through the shields to the other side, meaning the Tone will be forced to either back up or abandon their shield entirely. If you keep moving against Tone, it's unlikely that they'll be able to hit all their marks on you, and even if they do, if you're playing cover, you can just bait the missiles into hitting whatever's in front of you.
Engaging hostile Titan. Energizing weapon systems.
Just like with Scorch, Legion is a big chunky boy. For you, that just means an easier target. I would still be careful though, since Legion is a bit more lethal against you than a Scorch is. For one, the gun shield blocks most of their body. However, it doesn't block all of it, so you can still land a sneaky hit or two. Otherwise, I treat it just like the particle wall, in which I'll just use a cluster missile on it. Since he can't run with a gun shield up, he'll take a bit of damage before he can back up. If he does manage to sneak up on you, then be careful. Power Shot is incredibly powerful, and even if you manage to get away, you'll be leaving with a lot of holes in your back. But yeah, just like with actually most other Titans, just keep moving and sniping them from afar.
Pilot, I am engaging a hostile Titan. XO-16 armed to kill.
Depending on who you ask, Monarch is either pretty easy to deal with, or is an absolute nightmare to fight against as a Northstar. For one, unlike every other Titan in the game, Monarch has the ability to heal herself through Battery Thief, Energy Siphon, and Core usage. Her kit also makes her a very effective roamer, as they help Monarch in being able to choose her fights even more so than Ronin in some cases. So with that, smart Monarchs tend to roam the outskirts of the map, which doesn't really bode well for a Northstar. Despite not being as lethal as a Legion sneaking up on you, Monarch has the means to actually keep up with you through Energy Siphon and Rearm refreshing her dashes. Her missiles can also easily take out your tether traps, and if you let her live for too long, she'll be even more annoying to deal with. So let me make this clear. Make sure targeting the Monarch is a priority. Being able to self-sustain a Titan for so long spells disaster for you and your team. But luckily, you're one of the hardest hitting Titans out there. Therefore, whenever you see a Monarch, target them with extreme prejudice, and make sure you keep tabs on them so that they won't make you their next meal. First, let's start off with the Titan kits. Number 1, Assault Chip. Now, it might be cool whenever your Northstar hits a funny snipe from across the map, but the Assault Chip is terrible. Northstar is all about precision. The Assault Chip is the complete opposite of that. With low firing speed, low accuracy, and a highly hands-on kit, Auto Northstar will never win a Titan 1v1, nor will she provide any sort of high value. And this kit is useless in a mode like Titan Brawl, where you have to manually pilot your Titan. Number 2, Stealth Auto Eject. I'm gonna say this flat out, Stealth Auto Eject will never be a good choice if you want to maximize your Titan efficiency. Just because you're doomed, it doesn't mean that you're done. Compared to other doomed Titans, Northstar is pretty good due to the fact that she doesn't need to expose herself for long periods of time in order to deliver huge amounts of damage. Learning when to eject is a skill in itself to master, and if you're really getting that annoyed by getting goosed out of the air, then just run Cloak before you drop your Titan. Number 3, Turbo Engine. In my opinion, Turbo Engine is the best Titan kit for Northstar, and let me explain why. As you all know, Northstar doesn't really have that many ways to fight back if a Titan gets up right in her face. The solution to that problem is having that extra mobility to run away, or to prevent that problem from even existing by constantly moving around the map and taking angles. Some may call it a crutch for bad positioning, and who knows, they may be right. But in a game where movement and speed are an integral part of the design, I say, I don't care. I'll play what I want. Number 4, Overcore. Depending on how you play Northstar, it's a tough choice between this and Turbo Engine. The reason I lean towards Turbo Engine though is that I find it more applicable in most scenarios. However, Overcore isn't a bad choice either. Sure, Flight Core isn't exactly the best damage core in the game, but a core's a core. It can't hurt to get it a bit earlier. It's for that reason that I actually run Overcore on smaller, more confined maps like Complex and Crash Site. To be fair, who needs that extra mobility when there's really only 1 or 2 paths you can go down? Coupled with the fact that it's easier to run into Titans unexpectedly due to the confined nature of these maps, having your Flight Core earlier can save you from some sticky situations. Number 5, Nuclear Ejection. Now this may not be the best Titan kit, but it sure is the funniest! Northstar is one of the only Titans where you can consistently score nuclear eject kills on some unsuspecting enemies. And it's all thanks to the tether traps. Be warned though, it's still pretty tough to pull off since 1, you have to be doomed, 2, you have to get close enough for the blast to hit, and 3, you have to make sure your target doesn't run away. In my experience, I found the most success on small maps and on freshly dropped Titans. The reason why you would want to go for a newly dropped Titan is because you'll minimize the risk of something killing you before you blow up, and unless they're a Ronin, it ensures that they'll be stuck by your tethers and subsequently can't escape. Again, this isn't the best Titan kit, but it sure is satisfying when you do pull it off. Number 6, Counter Ready. My opinion on this thing isn't really good or bad, so to speak. It can help when the Titan starts rushing you, or if too many pilots are harassing you, but just get better. Now, I might sound like a dick here, which I am, but realistically, Northstar just doesn't need that second smoke. But that doesn't mean it's a bad choice. Stay tuned, because this kit actually has some decent synergy with another kit that I'll talk about later. Now, let's talk about the real meat on the bones, the Northstar kits. Number 1, Piercing Shot. Now if I stuck to being an attrition Andy, I might have said that this kit is utterly useless, since Titan drops in that mode are sporadic, and most of them don't really stay with each other to warrant a piercing shot anyways. But when I started to play Titan Brawl and Last Titan Standing, I received a vision. Due to the nature of Titan Brawl and LTS, people will tend to stick to each other and maybe even get into each other's way. That's where Piercing Shot comes in. This kit allows you to bypass the bullshit called your teammates, and it allows you to hit collaterals. Not to mention that enemy Titans tend to stick by each other in these modes, so you'll notice that you'll hit more consistent collateral shots in general. All in all, if you plan on running some Titan-based combat, don't sleep on Piercing Shot. Number 2, Enhanced Payload. As good as Enhanced Payload sounds, in practice, it's pretty mediocre. Sure, you might catch a pilot or two off guard with its extended range and longer duration, but in the end, it's still a cluster missile. It's not going to be the most driving factor when you win a game, and truthfully, there are just other kits that are simply better.
Number
3. Twin Traps. Personally, when it comes to this Titan kit, I only really ever run it whenever I'm using Nuclear Eject. It's definitely not the most impactful kit, but if you just want to be flat out annoying and spam even more traps around the map, then this is the kit for you. Otherwise, I think this kit is just genuinely pretty meh. Number 4. Viper Thrusters. Viper Thrusters is almost universally considered to be Northstar's most powerful kit on most maps, and for good reason. Here are the numbers. Your VTOL hover max speed is increased by 33%, and flight core max speed is increased by 60%, which brings it all in line with your regular sprinting speed. Instead of being limited as a situational poke tool, it now becomes a viable horizontal movement tool, as you can maintain your top speed while being airborne. Not to mention that it greatly increases the effectiveness of your core since you can more easily keep up with targets or back away from them. Overall, this kit is definitely the go-to if you want to max out your Northstar efficiency in most scenarios. But I'm gonna be honest, I think this kit shouldn't really exist, and instead, it should have been the default for Northstar. Then again, I'm not a game developer, so what do I know? And last but not least, we've got Threat Optics. I'm gonna be honest, I thought this kit was useless at first. I mean, every enemy already has a red outline, so what's the point? But not gonna lie, when I first started trying it out in a match, I was genuinely surprised by the clarity that it actually gives you. In Titanfall 2, shit happens. So much shit happens in fact, that it can be hard to keep track of what's going on. Threat Optics remedies this problem by making the outlines even more obnoxious. Oh, and a little tip for you. Remember Counter Ready? Well, it turns out that being able to see through electro smoke is, pretty good. I, however, didn't even think of this. You'll have to thank one of my subscribers, Will-O-Wisp, for bringing this up. And now, let me throw you a couple more tips and tricks your way. Now, unlike the last guide, this time around, I'm going to throw in a couple of tips that my very own subscribers suggested. If you want the chance to have your tip featured in the next Titan guide, make sure you hit that subscribe button, and keep a lookout for my community posts. In there, I'll be posting polls, updates, and other things. So if you want the chance to influence my content, head on over. Anyway, let's get right into the first tip. Tip number 1. No smoke, no problem. This first tip comes from Parimo Apaya. Sorry if I butchered that. If you got a nasty pilot on your backside, but you've got no electric smoke, well, here's another solution. If you react fast enough and use a cluster missile on a wall, you can actually turn around and back up towards it, so that the unfortunate soul that is rodeoing you gets blasted into bits and pieces. Number 2. Support your teammates. Northstar works well as a high damage backline support, so if you see a frontline Titan in trouble, help them out from afar. While they draw the enemy's attention, you can aim for critical shots, knowing that you'll be mostly safe from their gunfire. Tip number 3. Hover crouching. This next tip comes from Soup McNoodle. If you crouch while using VTOL hover, you can actually get on top of some of the ledges on certain buildings. One good example of this is the Double Towers building on Boomtown. And another thing, this tech allows you to ride the evac ship on some maps as well. Is it practical? Maybe not. Is it funny? Hell yeah. Tip number 4. Practice makes perfect. Northstar's railgun is sometimes pretty tricky to work with. While the projectile is pretty fast, it is slow enough to where at longer ranges, you can mess up shots that might have looked pretty easy. That's why, in order to master Northstar, you've got to commit to it. Learn the trajectory patterns and get a feel for it. Eventually, you'll be wrecking shit from left to right. Tip number 5. Indoor Flight Core. This last tip comes from Sawyer H. If you hover and quickly use your flight core before you reach your maximum hover height, you'll stay at that height for the whole duration of the flight core. This is useful in maps where the ceiling may prevent you from utilizing your entire core. And yeah, that's basically Northstar. If you're a Northstar main, feel free to comment any extra tips and tricks down below. I also want to thank you guys for getting me to over 3,000 subscribers. Anyways, if you couldn't tell, I kinda lost motivation towards the end of the video, and I want to be transparent about it. The reason for that is, well, I simply had other ideas I wanted to do at the time, but you know, stuff can pile up. And the culmination of what I put together in this video doesn't really satisfy me overall, but I'm still proud of it nonetheless. As for the next entry in the Basically series, I'm gonna definitely delay it for a while. From the beginning, I never wanted this channel to be solely Titanfall focused anyhow, and I want to switch it up from time to time. Only playing Titanfall 2 and creating uninspired content is something I definitely don't want to force myself to do, and yeah. In other news, I do plan on maybe live streaming in the future. Of course, with what I have in hand, it's gonna be a bit scuffed, but I still want to do it. That, and I want to interact with you guys more. Again, thank you guys for sticking around, and as always, I'll see ya in the next one. Peace.